This game key was provided by the MetaQuest Creator Program. Augmented Empire is a futuristic turn-based tactical RPG originally released for the Oculus Go in 2017. This is the second tactical RPG we've gotten in the last 30 days after Square Enix's Triangle Strategy. I'm also playing that game, and I gotta tell you, I like Augmented Empire more. I'm live with Mike, let's talk about it. Augmented Empire comes from developer Coatsink, probably best known for the criminally underrated Jurassic World Aftermath. They also made a great story-based puzzle game called Shadowpoint that you should all check out. Augmented Empire will hit Quest 3, 3S, and 2 for just $10, and I gotta tell you, I think it's worth your money if you're looking for a solid RPG. I'll try to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible. For those who weren't in VR back in 2017, games on the Oculus Go were all 3'd off, or 3 degrees of freedom. 3'd off basically means you look around in the space but you can't physically move through it like most traditional VR games today. For this updated version of Augmented Empire, Coatsink has added the ability to play in passthrough, which works pretty well as the entire game takes place in front of you in a 3-dimensional diorama. This is very similar to the mixed reality treatment for Demio from Resolution Games. The devs have also upgraded the graphics with 2K textures for Quest 2 and 4K textures for Quest 3 and 3S. Visually, the game still does show its age as the environments aren't particularly detailed, with the Quest 3 having 2.5 times the resolution of the Oculus Go. I'm glad the devs raised the texture quality. Everything looked crisp and sharp on the Quest 3, if not a little simple. You play as Craven, a silent character who speaks to a robot assistant named Hartman. Together, the two of you are remotely communicating with Ashley Thorne, a mysterious freedom fighter you control in third person. This game takes place in the fictional city of New Savannah in the year 2058. In this dystopian future, because let's face it, the future is always dystopian, humans are separated into class structures via a 10-point rating system, with the lower rated citizens left to struggle down in the lower city slums. Less than an hour in, you meet Ashley's daughter, Willa, and everything basically goes to hell. Over the course of the roughly 10-ish hour campaign, you'll piece together a team of 6 different characters with their own special abilities and fighting styles. At this point, I should mention the major plus for this game: all of it is voice acted and the cast is terrific. Ashley and Willa are voiced by Amelia Tyler and Jennifer English, better known as the narrator and Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3. The cast also includes Nick Frost from Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, Kate Mulgrew from Star Trek Voyager and Orange is the New Black, and Garrick Hagan, aka Luke Skywalker's best friend, Big Starklighter from Star Wars: A New Hope. There's no wooden, flat dialogue that sounds AI generated here. I'm looking at you, Chernobyl, again. No, these actors breathe life into these characters in this world.
I wish it was easier.
I'm on it. Worst comes, I can take Eugene.
Same here. With this lumbering dolt, you'll be parked here all night.
See you real soon, guys.
Yeah.
While you're out on missions, you get some fun interplay between team members that changes depending on who you pick for the mission. This isn't just dull exposition either. Like I said, the main cast is fantastic and you'll quickly find yourself with favorites depending on your taste. Every character has a backstory that gets fleshed out during the game, and honestly, by the end, I liked every single one of them. I've played a lot of RPGs over the years, and that's a really rare thing to say. In terms of controls, if you ever play games like Fire Emblem, XCOM, Final Fantasy Tactics, or Triangle Strategy, you're going to feel right at home here. Movement and combat works in a node-based system. You can move your characters by tapping the square with your controller or finger if you're using hand tracking. There's also an option to use your controller like a mouse, pointing and clicking from very far away. The last method is what I mostly used for my playthrough, as I was recovering from COVID-19 while playing this, so I was trying to conserve energy and move as little as possible. Positioning is really important in this game, and you'll see an icon indicating whether your character or an enemy is within line of sight. When you attack, a dial appears and you have to either tap the circle or press trigger on your controller at the right time for a successful attack, a critical attack, or just a complete total miss. On defense, you're doing the same thing to either evade, get hit, get critically hit, or lesser damage grazing shot. There is an option to turn this off and make the combat completely RNG, but I've had enough bad dice rolls in tabletop games to know better. You can arrange the board in 1 of 3 predetermined positions, basically either to angle it up or to leave it flat so you can set it down on the table and spatially anchor it. In this world, humans can alter their physical abilities via surgically implanted augment. These augments allow for the special abilities such as the highfalutin Margot, who can disappear and sneak up on enemies to attack them. The heroes and enemies in this game all fall into certain classes, but they're not your typical Dungeons & Dragons classes. Here you have soldiers, marksmen, ghosts, runners, muscle, and programmers, all with their own special traits. In combat, each character gets 2 action points with which to move, attack, or use an item like heals, grenades, or traps. Each character also has a fully customizable skill tree that you can add to with physical augments that you find laying around locations during missions. Every time you have an augment to spend and a character levels up, you can select from one of 2 chosen options for that slot. If you change your mind later, there are other items you can pick up to destroy an augment and then pick again. It's a great system that lets you tailor your team to your strengths as a player. Each augment also has something called an overload, which is basically a second level that makes that ability even better. You can buy augments and overloads from a shop between missions, with in-game currency being jewelry and scrap that you'll also find lying around. I love this whole system because it rewards exploring the map fully instead of just rushing headlong into the next fight. Exploration really doesn't take all that long either. You're talking maybe a minute or 2 per screen to get everything, and you can pick items up after fights so you don't have to burn action points trying to get them in the middle of combat. The game will also provide markers to show you where you can move to pick up hidden items or have conversations with NPCs. It's all really intuitive and easy to learn. There's no armor or weapon customization in Augmented Empire. Everyone pretty much has a base weapon or 2 plus all-purpose items, so the skill tree is really where the game differentiates their combat styles and makes the game replayable so you can try different loadouts. Having said that, this game doesn't fall into the trap a lot of RPGs do of just letting you pick your 2 or 3 favorite characters and only using them. Across the 26 missions in the game, I say about half of them force you to use certain characters as the plot dictated, so you're forced to learn how to fight with every character and learn synergy between them. This makes some fights more difficult than others depending on your playing style, but it incentivizes you to spread out your augments and overloads because you never know when you're going to be able to pick your team or be forced into a specific alignment. This might turn some RPG lovers away, but again, I appreciate the challenge of getting good with every character. The story, as most RPGs tend to do, starts fairly slow as you put your team together. Willow in particular is a pretty damaged character due to her strained relationship with her mother, and frankly she's a bit of a brat for the first hour or so you have her. That changes as you get to know her story and why she is the way she is. Good RPGs use these fantastical elements to tell very grounded human stories. By the end of the game, I was turned around on Willa and a couple of the other characters I didn't particularly care for at first. One thing I should also mention is that playing as Craven and Hartman, where you're communicating with the team, you also have one of 2 different dialogue options you can go, and your relationship with characters will change depending on the route that you take. Whether you're being like a passionate, sympathetic overseer, or just a hardline, nope, we gotta get the job done kind of person, you will see your relationship with the character evolve over the course of the story. To my knowledge, it doesn't really change the plot, although there are multiple endings to this game depending on the path of your dialogue. But it's a fun little addition to the game, and again, you can replay certain sequences or just replay the game entirely to see how different dialogue choices would change the path. Another really pleasant surprise was the score. I shouldn't really have been surprised by this because Jurassic World Aftermath and Shadowpoint both had excellent music and sound design. Augmented Empire scores this futuristic sounding synth that really works for the game. In case you couldn't tell, I really love this game. So much so that when I was offered to review it, after 2 hours of playing it, I stopped playing Triangle Strategy because I was more into this game. At $10, this is a steal if, like me, you're starved for a good turn-based RPG in VR. DMO is one of my favorite games, but it doesn't have the character depth and storyline that Augmented Empire does. It's not without its flaws though. The UI is a bit too rigid for my taste. I said earlier that you can resize the board, but those prefixed positions were a pain. I mentioned DMO earlier, and one of the things I liked about that game in VR is that you can tilt the board pretty much to any angle, anywhere from like 5 degrees all the way up to a 90-degree angle, and you're looking at the board directly in front of you. You can't really do that here. You also can't rotate the world at all, and whenever there is a scene change, it resets the position and then you have to resize it again. That got old really fast. Between missions, there are pop-up flat panels to adjust your character trees and buy items at the shop. This panel was way too close, forcing me to cock my arm back to hit some of the options. And then the villains in this game don't really measure up as well. There's a lot of them that you encounter several times, and they pretty much fall into some, at times, cringy stereotypes. There's one character I kept calling the Temu Tony Soprano, complete with the Italian accent. Ultimately, they're there to service the plot, but as I record this review, I only remember the names of 2 of them off the top of my head. They're not particularly memorable. The dials I mentioned earlier that you have to trigger on time to attack or defend yourself sometimes moved obscenely fast. The hitboxes were determined by your character's stats and the distance to the enemy, but some balancing wouldn't hurt there. I got hit a lot late in the game, even just from partial cover. Finally, unless I totally overlooked it, I didn't really understand how the turn order worked in the game. I'd have a character be last in rotation, then it'd be first in rotation after the enemy's attacked. So I was constantly adjusting my plan of attack on the fly depending on how their turns fell. There's a good chance I did overlook this because I was quite sick when I played through this, and COVID brain fog is an absolutely real thing. Having said that, I really did love this game. The storytelling is top notch with mostly great characters and fantastic voice acting, something I can't say for 90% of the VR games that I play. I grew up playing single-player adventure games and RPGs, so I'm used to good plots in my games, and VR has consistently let me down for years on that front. Frankly, some of the best, deepest stories in VR are in sit-down games like this, the two Moss games, Ghost Giant, Table of Tales, Crooked Crown, and most recently, Escaping Wonderland and Triangle Strategy all do a great job of telling a compelling story with interesting characters. This game, like all games, is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but for $10 I call this a must-play for any turn-based RPG fans in VR. If you have any questions about Augmented Empire, feel free to ask in the comments, but not before you tap that like button, share this review, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, and I'll catch you on the next one.